The Kind Classroom, Cultivating Care and Connection Beyond the Grade with Jeremy Ricketts. There was a few housekeeping items they wanted me to mention. One was to remind you that there will be the booth presentations in the Sunburst Lounge during lunch. And also these sessions will be recorded and posted on the ETE YouTube channel, so you can refer back to them after. And there was one more thing. Oh, and don't forget there is the asynchronous quad side sessions that are posted on the ETE website that you can check out. And we'll give it to Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I know there's a lot of great sessions going on right now, so if you need to sneak out and catch some of the other ones, feel free to do so. I certainly understand. As mentioned, I'm Jeremy. I'm at the Eastern Campus in the Department of English, lecturer, and here is my presentation. I always start a PowerPoint presentation very dramatically with the curtains opening. And now I'm going to ruin the effect by going to a poll, because I love a good poll as well. So if you have a device, if you could, this is a word cloud, so you only get one word. You can scan this QR code, I'll make it larger, or you can go to polev.com/USUJ, or you could send the text like that. And in one word, what does kindness and teaching mean to you? I'm just going to do a little, take the pulse of the group here, our cozy little group, and see what happens. I do use this in class a lot. Word clouds can be very revealing. Students are endlessly interesting and creative when it comes to these. Empathy, already got some popping up here. Yeah, don't worry about putting your name in or signing up or anything like that. And doing a word cloud at the beginning of class often helps me change my approach. Not drastically by any means, but I can say students are really emphasizing certain parts of the lesson for the day, and I can see where to take the class, have the flexibility and dynamics built. And word clouds are just so pretty and interesting. See, a few people typed empathy, so that makes it larger. Understanding, vulnerability, listening, connection, love that. Considerate, flexible, we're going to talk about that today for sure. Patience, trust. That's a great list. And something got larger, I think, is what happened. So keep these words in mind. I think this is a great way to take the pulse of the room here and think about your own approach to your classroom practices and how they fall under these words and under this, what you'll hear today about a pedagogy of kindness. Anybody read anything about it at all? Pedagogy of kindness? Just checking on that too. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm going to cheat and do this again. The curtain opens. Very quickly, not too much of this, I promise. Intellectual origins of a pedagogy of kindness. I thought it was really interesting because, first of all, Kate Denial, she is kind of the leading voice right now in this field. And she says, pedagogy of kindness is, quote, about attending to justice, believing people, and believing in people. It's a discipline, and really code people for students, for the most part, is what it's directed at. But it's more than that, as you'll see. And then I found a good quote from a book called Enacting a Pedagogy of Kindness, and they say, Witzel and Forsyth, pedagogy of kindness is a teaching philosophy that emphasizes compassion, care, empathy, and respect to foster better learning and a supportive environment. So that's kind of our baseline definition, but I think it's important to say what it's not as well, because kindness does not equal niceness, because sometimes kindness can mean having a hard conversation with a student who is struggling in some way, and it might not feel nice to do that, but it is ultimately kind and helpful for them. And just because a class has ease of access does not mean it's easy. I thought our keynote speaker did a nice job this morning speaking to a lot of that. So keep that in mind as well as we go. Coincidentally, you'll see some names on here that were mentioned this morning as well. But let's start in 1928. There was an educational theorist named Eugene Bertram Willard, and he says, quote, "Kindness is a greater factor in pedagogy than some teachers are ready to admit." So this is not something brand new, but it's something that, in fact, the Enacting a Pedagogy of Kindness book is an edited collection, and one of the authors said, when I was asked to write this chapter, I didn't really know what a pedagogy of kindness was. I just called it good teaching. So I think it's something that a lot of us do, but I think the great thing that Kate Denial's doing is putting it into this disciplinary framework and giving it some real professional weight. But ideas like this stretch back to ancient Greece and Rome. Denial relies particularly on those two names mentioned this morning, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and Bell Hooks' Teaching to Transgress. So I thought that was a nice tie-in with our presenter this morning. Freire, as probably many of you know, is about dialogue, respect, and agency. He talks about the banking education model and how it is not good for students to just have the sage on the stage up front depositing information into the students and not having them do problem-posing activities. Problem-posing education regards dialogue as indispensable to the act of cognition, which unveils reality. Bell Hooks is about love, freedom, and community. She says, seeing the classroom always as a communal place enhances the likelihood of collective effort in creating and sustaining a learning community. And Catherine Denial is about kindness as daily, concrete classroom practice. So, she actually starts with kindness to self. I thought that was really interesting because a lot of us, myself included, don't always think about that first. But she says, quote, "Student learning conditions are teacher working conditions." I thought that was such a great quote, and it really resonated with me because that first one, forgiving ourselves for our mistakes, is hard to do, for me anyway. This is live theater, and things can go wrong. As prepared as we are when we step in front of the classroom, can make really big lesson thud that our students just don't respond for some reason, or we get a fact wrong, or we misremember part of something, or we go too fast or too slow or whatever. We have to forgive ourselves for those things, but also hold ourselves accountable through reflection. So after it's over, saying, what happened? What went wrong? What could I do better next time? Understand our positionality as well. Kate Denial talks about this a lot over several pages, where the approaches that you use within your classroom are going to be very dependent on the subject that you're teaching, whether you're a lecturer, adjunct, professor, race, gender, sexuality, things like that. As you'll see, my policies are pretty flexible and open, but I found that easy as a white male. I have not had as much pushback as my wife has, who's also a professor up at USU Eastern, and she has had more pushback than I've experienced. So if we understand our positionality, that also opens up empathy for us to understand our students' multiple identities as well. Take time away from email and work. I'm terrible about that. I felt shamed when I was reading Denial's book because she said to model in your own email practices what you would want in others. And I am always emailing people on Sunday nights at 11 p.m. and things like that. And she says, try to restrict your emails to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Some of my colleagues in the English department put that into their syllabus. I'm only going to answer email from this time to this time on these days because I have a life and a family and things like that. Don't forget eating, rest, and physical boundaries. I thought physical boundaries was really interesting because she urges us to separate our work environment from our leisure environment, and everything happens on my couch. All of my work, all of my leisure takes place on that couch, and I really need to go to I have a desk, but I just kind of combine them. It starts to bleed into each other a little bit, and it can be mentally stressing. Guard your yes, that's probably the worst one I'm at the list. I can't remember the last time I said no, and seriously, and I've been doing this for many, many years, and I'm still have a problem with that. So, but reading this book has re-inspired me to try. And that's what she says too, and I would encourage you is, she says you don't have to do all these things at once. You can do one per semester, one per class. Just ease into it, see what it feels like. And one of these days I'm going to say no and see what that feels like. And these last two, you're doing right here and now, investing in our pedagogical development and embracing community. She has a whole section saying when self-care is not the answer, that sometimes you have to turn to a community of teachers, of learners, or whatever, family, friends, whatever that might look like, whatever your communities are, and let them help you when you need help. But let's go to the students. So this is some syllabus examples. I have been teaching for 25 years, starting as a TA and moving through. I've been at USU for, this is my 6th year now. And so my syllabi have changed over time, not only from this pedagogy of kindness, but also through professional development workshops and things like ETE. And the important, these parentheses here, is I'm not all the way done. I still have a long way to go because it's a lot of work. It's hard to make these changes, some of them are easier than others, and you'll see that, that some of mine still need work. But here's I had a classroom decorum policy before. And some of this is really good. I think these are important things to note. But some of them are not trusting students. Like, this was a vestige from when cell phones, I'm kind of old, and cell phones, where everybody was texting. So part of this is controlling one's cell phone. When in class you're not available to answer calls or to send and receive texts. Best to just turn it off to avoid temptation. I don't know what your experience has been. Before I was here, I taught at a small liberal arts college in Tennessee. The students were really on their cell phones all the time. Here at Utah State, not so much. Do you think? Just think about that. I'll ask later. But this is what denial talks about, is the syllabus is often our first point of contact with students. Hopefully we do a welcome message or something like that, but the syllabus is really where it begins. And if you don't lead with trust, then it can set up an adversarial relationship that is hard to recover from. And again, this is important. These are important things. But talking about university discipline, leaving the class, I think that there's a different way to approach that. We are all backed up by student codes of conduct at USU. So this is probably my biggest change of all in my syllabus. Maybe I should have ended with this one instead of leaving. But this is the order it appears on my syllabus. That's it. It's called Classroom Community now. And it says be kind. And I did implement that about 2 years ago, and it's worked out fine so far. Again, positionality, I think, helps. So your mileage may vary, but I just lead with trust when it comes to that. Here's, when I talk to my students about how I grade on the syllabus, I didn't talk about it at all. I didn't mention it. I did, during the semester, we would do grade norming, look at student anonymous essays from the past, things like that. But in terms of when they're deciding whether to drop the class or even take it, how do they know how I grade? They didn't. Now they do. This is kind of text heavy, but I don't use rubrics. I find them constricting. I don't want to have to take 5 points away from you if you forget to do X. And I know not all rubrics work like that. But I just try to make the prompt as specific as possible. I ask students to please read it like a contract. If you fulfill that contract, expect to do well. And even though it is specific, I still try to leave plenty of room for you to develop your unique writing voice. I might take that out of parenthetical, because I think that's so important that students know that that's going to be. I don't expect them to write like each other or like a robot, but they have their own unique writing voice. If there's anything unclear on the prompt, please ask questions. I love and welcome them as they make the prompts clear for you and future students. I feel that gives students permission to give me some constructive feedback. Sometimes they seem reluctant to do so. They're kind for the most part as well. And maybe nice though, right? The difference between niceness and kindness. It's kind, I tell them, to let me know when something's not working. So that can help future students. I also grade with the English outcomes and ID objectives in mind, so please become familiar with those. Finally, I grade believing that this is my favorite one, I grade believing that if you are really trying, you are succeeding. After all, the word essay derives from the French to try. And I really hit on that hard in the beginning of class and throughout the semester as well. To our presenter this morning, Kate Denial does not grade. She's an ungrader. And that is really popular in the English department. Are you an ungrader, Zach? No. Yeah. Not quite, yeah. Zach from English department, Blanding. Anybody ungrading in here? Kind of, sort of? Okay, I hope to hear from you later. And I'm just not there yet. I was just trained in a certain way. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Explanation, explanation. I felt really, I blushed this morning when they talked about gradations because I used the 1,000-point scale, which she said is the worst. He didn't use that language, worst. But anyway, she says that all disciplines could and should move to ungrading. Again, part of that, again, as he mentions, institutional context, your own positionality, things like that. Late policy. Again, this is about a trust issue. There has to be some kind of, I tell my students, the semester ends, and you do need, there are these things that we need to do in order to meet our outcomes, but this is my previous late policy. This is straight from my graduate advisor when I was in grad school, and this is his language, and again, about taking stuff, right? Taking other people's language. He says, to avoid unpleasant crunch times. I don't know, now to me that just sounds kind of condescending. Technology failures are no excuse, back up your work. That was days before the cloud was active, things like that. And it's ultimately your responsibility. It's true. It is ultimately the student's responsibility. But again, as a syllabus policy, it starts off on the wrong foot, rather. And then talking about this word, zero, right? That's not a good way to start the semester, thinking about that. Everybody's cortisol levels go up, right? So here's my late policy after. I still do have one, but it's communication, community focus. With communication, we can often, usually, there's my voice there, work things out on a case-by-case basis. If you're having problems keeping up, just please let me know. And students have done a good job of doing that. And I'm better at proactively reaching out. I do teach a lot of students. That's another question as well. The English department caps, depending on if it's a comp class or a gen ed class, are between 23 and 30. So I have, 100 students per semester. I don't know if that sounds like a lot or a little. To me, it's a lot. But I do try to really, if somebody starts to fall behind and they're not reaching out, to make that proactive outreach to the student. Look at this one. Who's going to read that? Nobody. I'm not going to ask you to read it. It's just too much. Participation attendance. Now, this is the hot topic in pedagogy of kindness as well. You might guess that Kate Denial and others urge not taking attendance at all. Having some kind of participation policy, but not grading it. And so this is my previous. It's just so condescending and capital, every day there's a reading due, and being in class means this, and blah, blah, blah. So it's just a lot of negativity, I think, and condescension. Some of it is important, though. Some of it needs to be said, but just it's too much text. Nobody reads it. You'll be allowed 2 absence. After that, you'll lose points for each absence. That's me experimenting with flexibility. I can be even more flexible than this. So it is like the top paragraph's the worst. Being late to class is extremely disruptive. It is, but so if you're consistently late, I reserve the right to count you as absent. That's from my graduate advisor as well. If you are texting or performing any other disruptive behavior in class, you'll be counted as absent for the day. Leaving early without prior approval will also be counted as absence. My goodness. So, we go over the syllabus on the first day, and students would have not read this probably, but if they did read it, they would say, what an unfriendly, unkind person. And here's I'm still working on this. You see in the brackets, still thinking through this one. But I called it a CAPE score. And what I do is I use the roll call attendance on Canvas. And so that's 10% of the grade. But at the end of the semester, well, first of all, I'm very, communication is key. Lots of excused absence possibilities here. And at the end, the difference between these is communication. Did the student do a good job of saying, hey, I'm going to miss because this is a thing in Utah. I'm going on vacation for like a week to Greece. Okay, thanks for letting me know. Here's what you need to do. Did they participate? That means the required assignments within class. Did they participate in like small teamwork and things like that? And then engagement. Engagement is above and beyond participation. Where did they ask questions? Did they contribute to the class discussion? They don't lose points for those things, but they can gain points back to their attendance grade. But I'm thinking about scrapping the whole thing based on kindness, pedagogy. Just have to dive into the deep end and give it a shot. Here's Kate Denial's participation policy. I think it's worth reading in full. She uses lots of great language that I'm going to gradually incorporate. As co-collaborators, love that right off the bat. In creating our learning space this term, we'll be relying on each other's informed, honest, and active involvement in class discussions. I realize different people participate in conversations in different ways, and that for some students, speaking in public is difficult. That's so important and something I struggle with because in the English department, in comp classes, each of our outcomes mentions the importance of effective oral communication. So it's like, what is that going to look like? I have some examples later of what I've done to address that, because she says, if you have any concerns about this, come and see me so that together we can work out the best way for you to participate in the class. It's important for us all to remember that different communities possess different culturally specific norms about how best to engage in a conversation. And for us to make room for this expression, remember to listen to one another and support your colleagues in their discovery of new ideas, their questions, and their articulation of thought. I love that, your colleagues, that's great. We'll crowdsource. Now here's the one that I would really like to do and I just haven't yet. She says, we'll crowdsource a list of conversational guidelines during the first week of classes. It's a big time commitment, but I think it could really pay dividends, and it certainly does for her. She's in the history department. If you have to miss any of our classes, know that we will miss your presence. Please email me to let me know you'll be absent so that I can support you and help you catch up afterwards. So that's it. And here's her syllabus. I meant to have it pulled up. Sorry. Just let me really quickly show you, though. All right. This is why you pull up your things before class. I'm going to forgive myself for this, though. So she starts out with visuals. I don't have visuals. Those are fun. She has lots of white space and little graphics, and I don't have those things yet. And it's a fair question. Why not, Jeremy? Why don't you have those things? It's just like, it's a lot of work to do everything. I'm doing it bit by bit, and I would encourage you to do that as well. Student hours instead of office hours. Introducing myself. She's made a website. There's COVID information. Ramadan. What are we here to do? Why study this? And so this is, if you'd like my PowerPoint, I can get that to you, and this is linked through there. But if you just type Catherine Denial syllabus, this comes up as well. So that's what hers looks like. Mine does not look like that yet. All right, so I would not be practicing what I preach unless I stop talking for a second and let you talk to each other. And this is something I do in class as well, where I'm not going to ask you to report back. This is just for you and your colleagues around you. And I tell students, this is just for you to talk about these questions. And you don't always have to report it back to the whole class. That can be anxiety-inducing. It can cause people to get distracted with, oh, what role am I going to play? Or who's going to be the spokesperson? And starting to do rock, paper, scissors and things like that. So just in pairs or small teams, take 3 minutes to talk through these questions. What message does your syllabus send explicitly and implicitly? What do you do on the first day of class to set the tone for the semester? And is there one small shift you've been meaning to make or that today is making you consider? If you're not doing a syllabus yet for some reason, then maybe just think about what you might do and things like that. So I got the timer on. Go ahead. I'll just stand back. Here's the hard part, is asking you to come back and interrupting. I'm so sorry. Usually if it's sorry. Yes, please finish up and come back. Sorry. We'll have time to talk again in just a minute here. Sorry. Come on back. Usually I give you a minute warning, but that was only 3 minutes total, so I didn't want to interrupt you with that. So yeah, we're just moving right along. Here is about timelines and assessments before class. Zoom policy. If you teach over Zoom like I do, what's your Zoom policy going to be? Camera on? Camera off? I've seen it both ways. Some people say, don't worry about the cameras, just do you. Some people say, you have to have your camera on or you're absent. I'm a little bit in the middle of that. I say, please have your camera on. And if you have a reason you are going to have it off, then no need to tell me but what the reason is, but just please let me know you're not going. Because the black box thing, it's a whole thing. Anticipate accommodations. There's universal design for learning, thinks about flexibility. I read many different statistics, but the most recent one I saw said 19% of students could use some kind of accommodation, but most of them don't ask for one. So if we think about that ahead of time, like captioning videos and putting in text for screen readers and hyperlink accommodations, things like that. Some kind of pre-class welcome, so we don't just come in cold on day one, whether it's text or video or both is useful. Community for a syllabus language. Some choice and flexibility baked into transparent assignments. The Tilt Higher Ed website, it's really good. It has a lot of different assignments from different disciplines that show examples that are not following the kind of choice and flexibility model and those that are. Basically, examples that state the assignment's purpose, list required tasks, and clearly define evaluation criteria. And then having students talk to each other, just like you just did. Probably, ideally, you would do that at the beginning, but this presentation, it landed there. But students on conversation boards or on that first day of class, letting them talk to each other. Conversation boards are become my go-to thing because I was a very shy and anxious undergraduate. I didn't say much in my time, unfortunately, and I always regretted it. But conversation boards are a really good way to get students, particularly that last one is my favorite one, that they reduce participation anxiety and promote risk-taking. I tell students I'm not going to cold call on you, but I might warm call on you. So that means that you wrote this thing on the conversation board, and if I call on you, you can just read it exactly as you wrote it, or you can paraphrase it, or you can elaborate on it, or maybe your thinking has evolved or changed in some ways, and that's what usually happens, that students feel confident about what they've said, and most of them do not read it word for word, even the anxious ones. So it does all these other things as well, I think very helpfully. It's been really, really great for my classes, and here's an example of my Intro to American Studies class. We're doing American mythologies, the frontier and the West, and so I asked them to either, number one, post a thoughtful question about the text, respond to a classmate's question or post, and make an observation, analysis, or connection to another text, concept, or issue. And oftentimes they did all three. And they get a conversation going before class even begins, replying to each other. And it's really fun to see, and it's been really successful. And students have, I think discussion was one of my weak areas in asking questions that generated vibrant discussion, and so these conversation boards have transformed that part of my class. Beginning class, especially on Zoom, I'm playing music because it's so awkward to come into Zoom and just sit there and stare at each other or the black boxes. But even in a face-to-face class, a lot of times I'm playing music. I ask students for music that they love, ideally that's education related in some way, and my go-to example is Hamilton, the musical. The I Have a Hurricane song talks about how he wrote his way out of his poverty and his circumstances and the importance of writing. As you know from the previous slide, I do roll call, and so instead of saying name here, here, I get students to write education-centered questions for roll call, and so I say the question of the day is, what's the skill you think everyone should learn? So I start going down the roll. And it's really interesting and insightful into my students' lives and what they think is important. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? That's really cool as well. I can help them. I give a lot of choice in my assignments, so I can help them if they're having trouble choosing something. I can say, hey, remember what you said about where you want to see yourself in 10 years? You can make this assignment lead right to that destination. The next two were really helpful for me to think about what students like what all-time favorite class you've ever taken, most important characteristics of a good teacher. And then the last one may seem off topic, but I give them a sequence schedule, and we were doing personal narrative, and one of our readings was about food. And so this student asked, do you enjoy cooking, baking, and if so, what's your favorite recipe? And that led into the day's discussion. So roll call is time consuming. Eventually, of course, you learn everybody's names, and you just go, but it still takes up time. So I wanted that time to be valuable. During class, popular culture for connection. I like showing film clips. If you say Bueller, Bueller, and your student knows what it is, they might have been my student, because I feel like students don't get that anymore. So I play the clip and say, you might hear that. My word cloud, we were doing Antigone. What single best word describes Creon's leadership style? And you see the word cloud there. Some really good, interesting choices. That's polling with purpose. Teamwork for transformation. I've stopped using the word group projects because students groan, some and roll their eyes. And so I use team projects, teamwork, and I teach teamwork. And so this is an excerpt from the exciting PowerPoint I use to teach teamwork and how that works within the class. And here's an example from really 3 and 4 bullet points. So using Google Docs and slides for thinking made visible, especially as I teach Connect a lot courses. I'm sending students off into their breakout rooms. It's really awkward to join the breakout room and kill the conversation. So if they're using a Google Doc or slide, I can follow along with their process and see how they're doing. And if they do clearly need help, they can actually type it into the doc itself, or they can come back to the main room, whatever. Or I can see that they're struggling, but they assign roles, and they type out responses, and it's been really great. Even in face-to-face classes, I use this because, again, that conversation killer, when I walk up on a group, my strategy for a second was I would walk up on a group and they would stop talking because I was standing there, but I would secretly be listening to this group over here. But now, using the Google Docs and slides, I can really see their progress, and it's been good. Ending class, reflection, pretty much everything. It can be fun. I do all kinds of different things, but this is my fun one I've done recently. After essay 1 was over, getting that over that hill, over that mountain, I asked them to please paste an emoji or meme or both that expresses how you feel after completing your first English 1010 essay. And it was hilarious. It was a space for students to vent a little bit. It was a space for them to see that they're not alone in the struggles that they had maybe with the essay and the way they feel about it. It's a way for those who felt great about it to get some communal applause, essentially. And so that was a lot of fun. But all kinds of reflective activities to end classes and units in the semester, I think, are really important. Assessing, Denial asks provocatively, I think, can grades be about joy? She says, yes, they can. You have to think about the hidden curriculum, the things that, again, I never left college. I said, I love college so much, I never left. So I know all of these things that my students don't necessarily know, particularly first-gen students. So I have to think about how I can be clear and accommodating for all students. Universal design for learning, I mentioned earlier. The transparent assignment, Denial talks about, where you explain the purpose, delineate the tasks, and make the criteria crystal clear. And I thought this quote was good about compassionate assessment. These authors advocate for inclusive, just, authentic, and intellectually challenging assessments designed so students come out of it with something definitively positive in the affective domain rather than feeling reduced or diminished. And so even if you do grade still, as most of us do, I think we can get here. And I'm trying to do better and better every semester. And I think eventually, I'm going to try ungrading one semester. So here's some before and example. This is just text heavy. It was fine, but it's not really helpful about telling students what they need to do to be successful with this essay. And here's an even worse one. This is it, really. This 3, but it's kind of big, 7 to 10 pages, and it just says, do this. And it doesn't really explain why or what they should do very well. And so this is when I used to use rubrics. This is, again, throwing my poor graduate advisor under the bus. This is what I was given. I used it, though, for a long time. And just how negative is this? Misunderstood, overly simplistic, unclear, pure, uncontrolled. That's just not a good way to help a student who's struggling, to have them come back with that kind of feedback. So I've moved away from rubrics into written feedback that is kind and says what's not working, also says what is working, but even better, what to do about what's not working and how it's not going to impact their grade if they can address that. Here's a bunch of examples really quickly. These first 3 are connected. So I started adding purpose and why this matters. And here, compared to that earlier slide, is here's what you need to do. You need a title, introduction, problem explanation, proposals, et cetera, et cetera. Up here is using creative assignments. As also mentioned this morning, the possibilities there. I just do that in one class right now, but it worked out really, really well. And I'm thinking about expanding it some. Choose your own adventure prompts, lots of those in all my classes. And being honest with students. I'm doing an experiment this semester to let them know, hey, I don't know how this is going to work, but thank you for going on this journey with me and helping me think about it. And this is back to the earlier point about students who are nervous about presenting and still have to meet all of our oral communication outcomes. And so giving them an opportunity to present in class, which many of them just go ahead and do, to record their presentation on Kaltura, or to write and record a podcast. Podcasting is big in the English department. And we have some resident experts there. And those were students who chose to do that. It was really cool as well. Micro moments of kindness, I call these. Greeting students by name, following up after an absence, acknowledging effort, listening, believing, all cornerstones of pedagogy of kindness. Some people say, among other things, that students will take advantage, and again, our keynote speaker was so nice to mention that this morning, that most don't. And there's still structures in pedagogy of kindness. Kindness lowers standards. You can maintain standards while expanding access. Difficult to scale. Again, we talked about that this morning. But there's some other ideas. Consider micro-communities in a large class, community discussion boards, warmth and announcements, flex days. And then some people worry about professional boundaries, especially those who are young, and the students are only a few years younger than you maybe, but kindness is professional. And that's what Kate Denial is really giving a lot of credence to that. So here's back to collaboration in action with your groups. Here's what you're going to do. Please. And we'll see. You have, I'm going to forgive myself. The timing wasn't great. Just a few minutes. But discuss specific things you already do in your classroom, so moving beyond the syllabus or going back to that if you weren't finished with that conversation, or ideas you'd like to try that fit within the framework of a pedagogy of kindness as discussed. Focus on concrete actions, policies, or moments that make learning more humane without lowering rigor. And then you'll choose a spokesperson to share a few key ideas from your group. So this one is reported back. And I will type some of these ideas up here and then share the link with you. And so you can, take it and maybe add to it later, look at it, think about it, reflect on it. But unfortunately,